department first. We won't look at the other departments until I'm going to explain the Excel assignment. And we're going to start with weighted average first. We'll get that one down before we make it more complex. So in the brewing department, we're going to look at June. On June 1st, the physical, easy enough to figure out. It had a beginning balance of 20,000 units, and during June added 92,000 units. I don't want to say these were gallons, 20,000 gallons, and they added 92,000 gallons. So what happened in the month of June? They were working with 112,000 gallons. Well, where did they go? 96,000 of those gallons were transferred to fermentation. They're no longer brewing as of June 30th. What's left on June 30th? Well, there's 16,000 gallons that are still going through the brewing process. What's going to happen? Our beginning balance plus what we added is going to equal our ending balance plus what was transferred out. So we're going to be able to match up. We're not going to be losing any units is the idea here. We have 112 that we're working with. 112,000 went somewhere. Easy enough to figure that out. That's going to be given to you. That would be what you would call up to the brewmaster and say, oh, how many gallons did this and how many gallons did that? And they'll tell you. And your job is then to figure out the cost. So you know that from, you look at the report and you figure out, well, June 1st, May 31st, our ending balances in work in process brewing were 11,624 for materials and 19,132 for conversion. Remember, conversion is direct labor plus overhead. Right now we're just going to lump those together. So if that was the ending balance last month, that's the beginning balance this month. That's easy enough to find out. As long as our records were good last month, we can just carry that forward. No additional work there. And then we have to figure out what were the costs that were added during the month. We go figure out how much direct materials were used. We have some way of measuring the cost of those direct materials. We have a methodology for that. So we know that 86,296 worth of direct materials were added. Worth of the grains and the water and the hops that were all added at the brewing department. Those came to a total cost of 86,296. And 213,188 of conversion costs were added. Applied overhead and the direct labor, so whatever we paid direct labor workers in the brewing department. We can go and find out all that information. So that means we have total cost of materials 97,920 and conversion cost 232,320. This would be our total cost in work in process. Now the problem is we got to figure out it's June 30th. How much of this cost is now moved on to the fermentation department, and how much of this cost is still sitting here in the brewing department? That's what we got to figure out. Weighted average is simply going to say, okay, we had some stuff in beginning balance and we had some stuff in ending. That's all good. But let's just mix them all together. So what we're going to do, that 5-step process. We're going to measure the physical flow of resources. We already kind of have that laid out for us. And then we're going to compute the equivalent units. So to figure out how far along those 16,000 in ending inventory on June 30th, how far along is it? Get equivalent units. So then we can figure out how much equivalent units was transferred out and how much was spent. So our first step, easy enough, figuring out the physical. Already talked about the beginning balance, 20,000. Started in this case, 92,000. Transferred out of 96,000. beginning balance of 16,000. All right, so we have an equation. It equals up. That's good. The figure that we were dealing with matches the figure that we're ending with. Well, our job now is we got to figure out eventually to match those costs up. Those costs of beginning balance. How many total there? That's right. We got to figure out where this beginning balance cost and what was the cost that we added during the month. Where does it match up to on this side of the equation? Well, we're told the bottom little line on the PowerPoint, June 31st WIP has 80% of the materials added and is 60% complete with respect to conversion costs. What's going to happen here? To make this a little bit more complicated than working with equivalent units in your Principles 2 course, bunching up a little bit more realistically. Direct materials aren't going to be added at the exact same rate that direct labor is added. If you really pay attention to how the beer was made, yes, big chunks of the materials are added right at the beginning, all the grains and everything. But then they said the hops are added at intervals. So they throw a batch of hops in after a certain amount of time has gone by. So direct materials then are added at certain points in time. Now conversion cost. Direct labor we're talking about here. Well, that's generally what we're going to, in most cases, it's going to flow somewhat on a straight line, being added continuously throughout the process. And if we're applying overhead, the idea is that's being added continuously throughout the process. So we're going to look at conversion costs, and when we get to the Excel, we're probably going to use that as our method to figure out how much direct material has been added. But we'll get to that complicated thing in a second. For now, what we know is that in terms of direct materials, remember with weighted average, we don't care what the beginning balance was all about. Even though it tells us the beginning balance is 75% complete to materials and 50% complete in terms of conversion costs, we don't care. We're just going to group this all together. So we don't care how far along it was. We just care about then that ending balance, that 1,600. How far along is this? So in terms of direct materials, it's 80% complete. In terms of conversion, it's 60% complete. Process, 16,000 units. 80% complete in terms of direct materials, 60% complete in terms of conversion. 16,000 times 80%, 12,800 equivalent units. So if we, instead of putting these direct materials into just completing 16,000 80% complete beer, if we had put in the direct materials to make a complete unit of beer, we would have made 12,800. In terms of conversion cost, the 16,000 times the 60%, 9,600 equivalent units. So if we had put all the costs of the conversion into making a complete unit of beer, instead of making 16,000 60% complete beer, we would have made 96,000 or 9,600 100% complete beer. So that's equivalent units. So we figure out the equivalent units on our ending balance. Why do we not put the transferred out? Well, if it's transferred out, are we going to transfer out anything that's not 100% complete? No. So the transferred out is already at a completed unit. So for terms of direct material and direct labor, it's already had 100% of its cost added. So our total equivalent units for this period, this month, June, the 12,800 plus the 96,000, 108, 800. $9,600 plus the 96,000, 105, 600. During the month of June, in terms of direct materials, we made 108,800 equivalent units of beer. In terms of conversion, we made 105,600 equivalent units of beer. These costs are related then to these equivalent units. So step three is identify the costs of which to account for. And that's these guys. These are this is the direct material cost. This is the conversion cost. So the total direct materials cost are 19. So it's 30 plus the. So the materials cost 11,624 plus 86,297, 920. And our conversion costs come to 232. So on this side of the equation, we have 97,920 in direct material costs and 232,320 in conversion costs. The beginning work in process costs plus what was added. Weighted average just says, hey, let's just throw them all together. Let's ignore the fact that this came first. We don't care. So to get the cost per equivalent unit, step 4. We have the equivalent unit. We have our cost. So the cost 97,920. The equivalent unit 108,800. Cost divided by your equivalent unit will get you the cost per equivalent unit. 0.90 or 90 cents per equivalent unit for direct materials. For conversion, cost for 232,320 equivalent units for 105,600. The cost per equivalent unit then $2.50. $0.20. That's what we had to do at this point. Figure out the units. Where physically are the units? Well, those aren't 100% complete. If they were 100% complete, we'd go ahead and transfer them out and get them started on the next stage. So these are partially completed. So that means we're going to have to add more costs next month to finish them up. So we have to figure out how far along are they. Well, in terms of direct materials, we've added 80% of the direct materials. Next month, we have to add 20% more of the direct materials. Conversion costs, we still have 40% more time that has to go into those 16,000 units. So that means we calculate how far along are they at this point. How much have we already put into them? We add that to the 100% complete units that were transferred out. So we now know our total equivalent units for the month of June. So now we can get a cost per equivalent unit. So what happens, what we can do with this? This 96,000 that was transferred out, how much cost is related that needs to go transferred out with it? Well, these are our cost per equivalent unit, and we have 96,000 equivalent units, because they're already in their correct terms here. We multiply it by, you can add them together technically for the and transferred out. But that gets you the cost that was transferred out. Happening here. Spending balance was 19,132. Materials added or 1696 conversion. So we have our wet brooding, where we have the beginning balance, that is direct materials, direct labor, and overhead. Now we're going to be transferring out $297,600 into with So what's being transferred into fermentation is the $297,600, as well as 96,000 gallons of beer. Out on the floor, 96,000 gallons of beer went to fermentation. In our books, $297,600 of cost was taken out of work in process brewing and put into work in process fermentation for the month of June. Questions on that piece? This would be the same as if we were completely finishing at this point, transferring the finished goods. The only thing is, we've got some more work that needs to be done on this. So it's going through a new process. So the ending balance then. There are two ways of calculating it. That means you have a check. Except when we get to Excel, we'll start doing rounding and we'll have some other issues. But one way is the fact that this is what's staying in ending inventory. So 12,800 equivalent units for direct materials times the cost per equivalent unit for direct materials. Make sure you don't go back to this number. These aren't what, this is not 90 cents per what these things are. It's 90 cents per the equivalent unit. Which comes to 11,500. For conversion, we had 9,600 equivalent units. That's a 2.20. 220. 21,120. So the cost of staying with these 16,000 gallons, 32,640. The other way to go about getting it, well, taking total of this cost, are the same number, subtracting off what was transferred out, must mean what's staying in. So, because you got an equation here, if 297,600 staying here, and you have a total cost of 330, 240 on this side of the equation. So 330, 240 minus 297, 600 is going to get you 32, 640. So either way, you can actually get that cost. Depending on what information you have, you always like to be able to do it both ways. The key with this is making sure you're multiplying by the equivalent unit, not multiplying by the physical units that are in process. Okay? Questions?
So the percent complete for the beginning width just doesn't matter?
Not for weighted average.
Okay.
It will for FIFO, but we'll wait to add that next week. Yes?
Where did the 332.41 come in?
That was adding all the cost that was on this side of the equation. The beginning balance is the direct material conversion plus what was added. Yeah, just that total number there. Okay. Now technically you can put this on in a nice little report called the production cost report. It's essentially doing what we just did and just putting it in nice, neat format, which is basically what you're going to do with Excel Project 2. Because Excel allows you to easily put all of this instead of scribbling it all over a piece of paper or on the board in a nice, neat format. That's a production cost report. A report that summarizes the production and cost for the period. It's used by managers to monitor the production of the cost flows.